got more seats up here if you want to come and have a seat. Might as well get comfortable. I hope we have a good conversation. Untie this. I got wires everywhere. My trip up here. So thank you. Thank you for being here. I'm grateful that you would take the time this evening to come and visit. And that's what I hope we are able to do. I hope we're able to have a conversation and talk about things that are happening and things that are important to you and what we need to do. So who here has heard me speak before? Either, okay, good. So we got a whole group, maybe online. Did you say online? Yeah, okay. So well over half of you have never heard anything I've had to say, which hopefully it's worth your time. Hopefully I can share with you some of the things that are happening and also we can have a good conversation. So as I'm talking, just be thinking about maybe a question that you might have for me, because I'll just kind of introduce myself, go through who I am quickly, but then we'll talk and we'll discuss some of the things that are happening in Idaho and some of the things that need to happen. So how did you, I also want to know, how did you hear about this tonight? Richard, okay. What? Friends? Email? Okay. Anybody social media? Okay, good. I don't blame you. They wipe me off, so I don't have much. I mean, one time I could send out a message and I'd reach 1 million or so people, and they just completely wiped me off. And there's a reason for that. If my message wasn't worth anything or wasn't threatening those that are in power, it would have no reason to want to wipe me off, right? They would just be like, let him speak. But that's not what they've done. And in fact, I just got a new phone number. I was like, why did you get a new phone number? And I have some friends in here right now that I just think, I never told them that my phone number was my new phone number. And they probably didn't want to get hold of me. Anyway, and in last year, November 3rd, what day is that? It was election day, right? Well, I had a phone account with Verizon that I'd had for, I don't know, close to 20 years. Actually, it was over 20 years. And all of a sudden, all my phones, the morning of the election, all my phones just shut off, like completely shut off. So I called Verizon. It took me 14 days and over 13 hours communicating with them, and they couldn't figure out what was going on. At least the lower levels couldn't figure out what was going on. And then on the end of the 14th day, all of a sudden just turned back on again. And I found it interesting because a couple days before that, I was getting all of these phone calls from these national reporters like New York Times, LA Times, and ABC, CNN, all of those wanting what I was going to do if the election got stolen. They wanted to know what I was going to do if the election got stolen, and I was like, I'm probably not going to do anything. And why are you asking me that question? And all of these things are going on, and then all of a sudden on the very election day, my phone goes off, and Verizon, according at least up to the supervisors I could get, which was fairly 3 or 4 levels up from the person who answers the phone, couldn't tell me why my phone was having trouble. All my phones on my account was having troubles. So there's a lot of concerted effort, as we've known, to silence people and to keep them from having influence. And I'm just one of them. But I do want to say that I usually play that as kind of just some music as you're coming in and sitting down. And you're the first group of people that stood up. It is the National Anthem. But it's kind of, I guess, what would it be called, a rendition, or it was, it's something that has a lot of other things that are going on, and so I'll play it in the background. I think that says a lot about you. And I appreciate that. It kind of caught me off guard. I was like, well, yeah, it is a national anthem. And then I'm like, well, there's not a flag up there. And I didn't see that until a little later. So thank you for standing. And I might be a little more cautious now playing that and not being aware that you might stand up and you might actually recognize what it is. Because we have been blessed tremendously to live in this country, to be born in this country. Thank you, Wendy. We have no idea how blessed we are to be able to just experience the things that we've experienced. It is very rare to be as free as we have been. And the reality is, and I hope that people are here today, because it is being taken. And we have to get out of our brain that it can't be taken. We have to realize that it is very rare what we have experienced in our lives, what our parents experienced, our grandparents, our great-grandparents, is very rare. And that it can and will be taken if it is allowed. And we don't make the rules. God created this earth, He put us on it, and He put natural laws that keep things in order. We don't make the rules. And for some reason, and you look through history and see if you can agree with this statement, but for some reason, He has required His children to defend liberty. He has required them to defend liberty. Not just say, well, God's going to do it. Not just say, well, Christ is going to come and it's all going to be taken care of. He has always required us to defend liberty. And I believe that now is the time where we have to really, really decide whether we're going to pass liberty on to the next generation or whether it's going to be lost. And if you think about what the United States of America has done, is much like what ancient Israel was supposed to do and did for a long time, which was become a power strong enough to stop oppression, to stop other powers from taking liberty, to be that big brother that says, oh, you're not going to do that. But what if we lose that? Just like ancient Israel did, where they become corrupt. They defiled their purpose. And no longer was there a power there to stop oppression. And what did that do for the earth? Anybody know history? It threw us into over 1,000 years. Well, it was actually more like a couple thousand years of there's just nobody there to stop the oppression. And criminals come in all shapes and sizes. And, you've got your street criminals, and you've got your government criminals. And one will steal your purse, and the other will steal your country. And there's always going to be someone out there that's wanting to take liberty, take your freedom, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit. And the only way it's stopped is people who love God, who believe in God, who plead to Him for His help and His advantages, uniting together and defending themselves. Whatever the circumstance, might be politically, might be physically, even might be legally, right? Defending themselves. And that is where we are at today. So, with that being said, I want to ask you a question. It's been up there for a while, so hopefully you guys have been able to think about it. What is freedom? I have to admit that when I kind of got thrown into this, because that's really what happened to my family and I, that we were just living, especially me. I wasn't even on the ranch in 2014. I was in Arizona. And we were just living, had a pretty good life. And then all of a sudden I see this massive force build up to actually destroy my family. Very similar to like what a Waco or Ruby Ridge situation was. And when all of that kind of, when all of it passed, at least, I mean, it never did pass, it still hasn't passed today, but when we kind of got through the main part of that, and on the back end, I began to really ask the question, like, do I understand what liberty is? Like, what is our freedom or liberty? What is freedom? And I had to really define that. So I want to ask you, what do you think freedom is? And I'm going to share with you what I believe it is. So any takers? I mean, there's lots of, like, no one's going to be, well, maybe some will be wrong if there's a Marxist or communist in there. But I don't think, like, hopefully this, you know, so don't be afraid. I mean, if it's a piece of it or all of it, but what is, to you, what is freedom? I mean, you feel it, right? You want it, you desire it, but what is it, right here?
Freedom is the ability to do what you want to do when you want to do it without having somebody looking over your shoulder saying, what the hell are you doing?
That's pretty good, right? To be able to do what you want to do, what you choose to do.
Now, we have societal standards and
I almost want to push the button
you
after
know,
you
I'm
said
not going to go out there and
Yeah.
do something stupid, but I'm saying within societal standards, freedom should be the ability to do what you want to do when you want to do it.
Okay, I think you're right on. I think you're really close. I'm gonna the last part of it, where you talk about societal standards.
Well, that's the problem.
No, you're good.
Societal standards change.
Well, you're good. I'm gonna define it because we're right on the same, almost word for word, and tell that I define that. But I'll bring it up. I'll hold it up here in just a little bit. Go ahead.
Just as long as you don't tread on anybody else's things that they want to do.
There we have it. There's the two together, right? Freedom is the ability to do whatever you want as long as you are not infringing upon another person's rights. So let's take the First Amendment, right? Freedom of religion. The ability to worship however you want as long as you're not infringing upon another person's rights. So you can worship a yellow dog if you want. I wouldn't recommend it. It doesn't make sense. But if you want to, and if we are free, then you can do that. What's that? You might get fleas. Yeah, that's right. That's right. But that. What about freedom to control your own property, private property? Be able to. So let's define that, or let's put this in this definition. To be able to do whatever you want with your property as long as you do not infringe upon another person's right. As long as you don't infringe upon your neighbor's rights or somebody else's somehow, you should be able to do whatever you want. And actually, the American dream, you've heard that term? It's been kind of morphed into something that it really was never. The American dream was that you could come to America. It was even beyond before the United States of America was organized, but it became very protected after the Constitution and the United States was organized. But it was be able to come to America and own property. See, before you were never anywhere else in the country or the world, anywhere else in the world, you couldn't own your own property. It was either a king's or a lord's or some governing power, and you just had to be able to, you were just a serf, where you had permission to use it, but they could take it if they wanted. It was never really yours. And what caused that is these people who would get in power, they just start grabbing up all this land and say it's all ours. And America was where everybody dreamed about coming to America because they could be their own king on their own property. They could build their own castle, if you would. Could be a little one-room log cabin, but it was theirs. They decided what they were going to do on their property, not anybody else. And so I have to ask you the question, are we losing that freedom?
Yes.
Yeah. With really nice people. Even our local governments are infringing, are very much infringing upon our freedom of private property. And how important is private property? Well, if it's always attacked. It's always the thing that they go after first. And there's a reason for that. You know, like for example, the founders defined property pretty much as the pursuit of happiness, owning property. In fact, they almost put in the Declaration of Independence life, liberty, and property. But instead they put a pursuit of happiness, but they understood very clearly you cannot pursue happiness without property. For example, where are you going to do, if you can't go home to your home, to your place where you can relax, then where are you ever going to relax? Wherever you're going to. I spent 2 years in federal prison, and I can tell you that wasn't my property, and there wasn't anything I could do to find the peace that I could find in my own home. But what if it doesn't really belong to you? What if it belongs to the county? What if it belongs to the state? What if it belongs to the federal government? Then do they have to have permission to come in and do what they, you're never secure. And the founders understood that it was extremely important that we completely own our property. And that was why we have this great history of homesteading and the Desert Entry Acts and all these mechanisms of disposal, because that was the founders, that was their design, their growth pattern, to get the land and the resources out into the people's hands so that they can own it. So also one other thing is Marxism or communism, one of the pillars of communism is the abolition of private property. And in fact, Karl Marx said that in the Communist Manifesto that communism can be summed up into one sentence: the abolition of private property. And so to be able to do whatever you want to do on your property, as long as you're not infringing upon another person's rights, is very important. What other rights? I'll just go down through these. Right to worship, own property, freedom to publish your thoughts. What is that called in the freedom of the press, right? Freedom to travel, freedom to trade with others, freedom to have and raise your children. Have there been other countries that have stopped that process from you having children, raising your children? China, right? Limits that, but not only that is that somehow your children become property of the state.
Government schools here.
Yeah. Where to live, freedom of speech. So these are freedoms that we need to be able to preserve. That we have to be able to preserve. And what are they? To be able to speak whatever you want to speak, as long as you're not infringing upon another person's rights. So just kind of tuck that away in the back of your mind, and always, if you haven't already, just tuck that away. And if you can accept that as the definition of freedom, then I think it'll do a lot of good, because then when you're in a community meeting and you're asking, such as a debate or a testimony, whatever you're trying to accomplish something, we'll try to accomplish liberty. Don't try to compromise with liberty. Try to accomplish liberty. How many times you go and, see some politician talking about how the best way to benefit or to manipulate a socialist program, right? Well, no, let's get rid of it. Let's make it something about freedom, and make that kind of your foundation. That when you're dealing with government, when you're thinking about who you're going to vote for, when you're thinking about how you're going to be involved in these processes and procedures and things that we do in government, that's what you base it on. Freedom. All right, so I need to give you a little bit of background about myself, but I'll go through this pretty quick and then we'll talk further. But the reason I need to give you a little bit of background, because I want you to know who I am, not just what MSN told you who I was. I want you to know actually, who I am, and because you could Google my name, and there's pages and pages and pages and pages of things, of people saying things of who I am, but it's not, at least in my, and I'm going to try to convince you that it's not who I am. And so I was born on the Bundy Ranch. Go ahead.
My favorite expression is, I want to hear it from the horse's mouth, not from his other end.
Well, I'll try to keep it on the front side. All right, that's good. So I grew up in southern Nevada on the Bundy Ranch. It's a very air dry place, but I experienced a tremendous amount of freedom there. And there wasn't a lot of people around close by, and we ran over a lot of acres of land, miles actually, square miles of land, running cows on the desert. This is my mother and father, Clive and Carol Bundy, and my dad's now 75 years old, and I'm just grateful to be raised by such good parents. Here's a little picture of the Bundy Ranch. It's beautiful in its own way. There's just a ton of landscape, but there's just not a lot of vegetation. And so here's a steer that's on the hill here, and you can see basically that's what they live off of. And it takes about 100 acres to produce enough food for one cow. Yeah. So anybody who's cattle people kind of get an idea, it takes a lot of land. And here's a scene. My dad's, that's him on a horse, and you see this bull here, and he's got some hair on his horn, and he just got done probably either hooking the horse or hooking one of the other cows. And they're not your tame Hereford or Angus. They have a mix in them, and we always, there's a term that's always used. They have to have a little ear in them. And anybody know that? Anybody understand what that is? It's just not a term that's used up here, okay? But you have to have a little ear in them, because they have to have about a quarter Brahma in them in order to survive. Because Brahma is the only breed of bovine that sweats. So they have to have a little Brahma in them. And so you'll see that hump on his back. But this bull here would be probably 3/4 Angus, and he's got about a quarter Brahma in him. And you have to keep that bloodline. But because it's really only for that area, you can't just buy some semen from a bull across the country and just use it. You have to continue to keep your bloodlines good and not, but still keep that breed in them. So that's a challenge in itself. Here's a scene I grew up with. This is we were constantly branding calves. That's my little brother, not me though. This is my little sister. She got off the bus. This is something that's not completely foreign to us. 4 dogs and a calf meets her, That calf actually my dad saved. His mother got hit on the highway, and my dad did a C-section and pulled the calf out and saved it. Mother died, so we bottle fed it. When I was kind of back up here, when I was about 15 years old, my dad said that the ranch wasn't big enough for the both of us. And we did butt heads a little bit, but the main reason was just simply that the ranch wasn't going to produce enough living for more than a couple families. And I was in the middle, and he was just telling me that you're going to have to go find your own living. You're going to have to go find another way. And as difficult as that was to take, because we loved the ranch, and we've always looked back at the ranch and wanted to have that life for our children and wanted to live there. But just like everybody else, you got to go put your big boy pants on and go make a living for your family. Well, I left the ranch, and I first served a mission in Minnesota for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I am grateful for that time. I went there for 2 years, and I was able to just focus on, getting to know the Lord, being able to teach the gospel of Jesus Christ, to be able to, do all kinds of things that were a lot different than being on the ranch. And it kind of refined me a little bit in a different way, and also gave me a much greater perspective about life. It was an eternal perspective rather than just living in this life. And I consider those years sacred to me, and I'm grateful for them. Then I went to Southern Utah University. I was there for a long time, wondered why I was there for so long, and finally I found out why, because I met my wife. I was there for 6 years and kept thinking, man, why am I, like, Cedar City's a little town. I'd started a business. I went to school at the beginning and just couldn't figure out why. Well, I was waiting for her, and I didn't know it. And finally she came along, and then shortly after, 4 months after, we moved to Arizona and began to build our life there. And I started a fleet maintenance business where I managed to maintain commercial trucks. So like your delivery trucks around town with the, they were all medium or heavy duty trucks. We didn't do a lot of the road ones with the big, long trailers, but the local delivery trucks is what we did, a ton of them. And I built up one of the largest fleet maintenance businesses in Arizona. I had hundreds of employees, dealt with millions of dollars a year in budgets, and we had a really good business, and we were profitable, and we were just doing well, and we had built this basically system that was unique to the industry and something that I wanted to duplicate and put in like a software or something, because there was nothing out there that was doing what we wanted, and we were using multiple different softwares. So when I was about 17, 18 years into business, I started to build our own software, and I put a team together, and we ended up building. It took us several years. We ended up building a really good fleet maintenance shop management software, and I was able to test it on my employees, and test it on my customers, and test it on my office staff and my vendors, and we made it really good, and then we began to sell it. And now it's one of the largest fleet maintenance shop management softwares in North America. One of the leading. And then since then I've since then sold my business. Now life was really good about that time. Like, I applied hard work ethics to build businesses, and I learned a ton. I had to learn how to work with people, and I had to learn how to communicate, but I was able to do a lot of that, and life was good. And it was the first time in my life that I actually had both time and money. Because usually you have time and no money, or you have money and no time, right? And so this was the first time that I had a little bit of a both, and I was praying and asking the Lord, like, what should I do with my time and my money? It wasn't like I could just be free to do whatever I want. I still had my business. I still had obligations and all of that. I, a whole bunch of kids, but I was wanting to know what I felt the Lord had blessed me, and I was wanting to know what I was to do with it. And then something happened. 2014 come around, and I watched the federal government basically surround my family's ranch home, and snipers on the hill, and threaten my family that if they stopped the federal government from destroying our ranch that had been there for 140 years at that time, that this would be another Waco or Ruby Ridge type situation. And I felt and knew that I had to go help my family, and I loaded whatever I thought I needed, and I went to the ranch, and I experienced an absolute miracle there. I saw some of the most terrible things that I'd ever seen at that time happen in the United States, and couldn't believe that it was happening here. but I also experienced some of the greatest miracles that I've ever seen as well. And I knew at that, after that experience, that God, our Father, is there, and that He wants us to be free. I understood that. And so that changed me. It changed me completely. And it put me on a path now has me standing in front of you here in Bonners Ferry. And there's a lot of in between then and now, including, moving to Idaho shortly after that. Standing for another family in Harney County, Oregon. That was basically the same thing was happening to them. And being put in prison, federal prison for 2 years. Spent about half that time in solitary confinement. And never once was able to have any physical contact with my wife or children the entire time. But then going through 2 major federal trials and beating them with the blessing of the Lord, beating them completely and walking out of those federal prisons without even a misdemeanor. The federal government spent $100 million trying to prosecute my family. And they put us in those terrible situations to try to break us so that we wouldn't have the will or the desire to fight them. And I went months and months and months and months in a 7x10 concrete box, never seeing the sun, never having any contact with anybody other than mostly just them pushing a tray through a little hole in the door. And that was my life. After living so free, and having all these experiences of raising my family, my wife, business, all the things that I had felt I had accomplished at that moment, and then now I'm shoved into a 7x10 concrete box, and they're saying that, it's the federal government, it's the most powerful government ever known to man, are saying that if we win, we're going to put you in prison for a minimum of 106 years. Entire lifetime. That's what they were saying. But there is a power that's much stronger than even the federal government. And we realized that, but nothing like what we experienced during those times. And we watched as we pled with God to make us free again. We would listen and watch as He would give us a little advantage here, a little direction here. And that built up to enough that we could beat the federal government, the most powerful government, with the most powerful legal team and the most powerful resources, in their own courts. And then not only do it once, but do it twice. And so, with that, I want to have a conversation. I want to talk. So hopefully you can feel like you can ask whatever question you want. You notice we did not have you fill out some question cards when you come in. And my campaign manager is not going through those quickly and trying to figure out the best ones that I can answer. That's not happening. So I'm here to talk to you, to answer your questions. You might have questions about me personally. You might have questions about some of the things that I'm proposing as a governor. What I would do. I'm here. My desire here is to answer your questions and build confidence in you that I might be the best shot for governor. And I would say this, and I've said this many times, and Riley might not like me saying this. He may not care either way. But I would be lying to you if I told you I wanted to be your governor. I absolutely do not want to be. But I feel an absolute need and a desire and a must to stop what's happening. And I feel that the position of the governor is a position right now, and I can explain to you why, that is necessary that we get in control of. And I believe that with that, in that position, we can and must turn this big bus around. And it's going to take the people's support. It's going to take a ton of support because when you're trying to change state policies, right, or statutes or regulations or whatever it is, and you got someone, say like as a governor, someone at the head that's truly trying to fight for the people. And then you've got like all these people in between, the bureaucracies, even the legislature and all that are kind of balking because they've had it their way for so long. You have to have the people putting a tremendous amount of pressure on the back end. And if that can happen, there's a good possibility that a tremendous amount of these, things that we're seeing, experiencing, can be turned around, and Idaho can preserve its conservative identity for another, generation. And I hope to be able to do that.
150 years.
What's that?
150 years.
Another 150 years? I like the sounds of that. All right, so now is the time to ask me some questions. So let's just have a conversation. Let's talk. So, anybody have any questions right here?
Okay, I understand your plan to replace property tax with a consumption tax.
Okay.
At the point of sale, roll it over in payments or whatever. My question is, we have a house, we have a mortgage, we're in our 70s, we probably won't, how does that help us? I mean.
You probably won't sell your
Yeah,
house or buy another one, or.
So will we keep paying property taxes?
So no, there's going to have to be. So there's a lot that we have to figure out. And we're working on this, and that's one of the things that we're working on. But so there's going to have to be some type of period of time where we phase out of the old way we're doing it, and there'll have to be a structured way in which either we consistently pay the taxes or somehow to where we go into that, because that's the reality. There's a lot of people that already own homes. They don't have plans on buying a home or even selling their home. That revenue is most likely needed still, and so therefore there will be some type of progressive way in which we roll out the property tax and go into the consumption tax.
How about applying a tax-free zone of 65 and up?
I think
We pay property taxes all our damn lives.
that's
When you hit 65, when both are 65, maybe one's 70 and the other one's 64. Yay, I'm 65 now. Now we don't pay taxes.
Yeah, so
Property taxes anymore.
and it ends up being where you paid it your entire life. Or,
Put our own kids through school. Why
So-
should we pay for?
so does who doesn't understand? Maybe we could, because it sounds like you've read and understand my plan with property tax. But anybody want me to kind of quickly go through what my policy on property tax is? Because I am proposing the elimination of property tax. And of course, what's the question I get right after that?
You're gonna replace it.
Well, how are you going to pay for your sheriff and your other legitimate? But
You'll have to earn his keep.
yeah, well, that you may not like that.
Yeah, right. I say, we're all good.
Yeah, all those tickets, right here.
I got a question that, how exactly will you change?
Yeah.
Like you said, you can't just do it by yourself as governor, you need this support of however percentage of the legislature or whatever. So how do you get that?
Yeah, well, so like I said, if there's I mentioned earlier, if there's a good policy or getting rid of some laws or regulations, and if it can come from the top, from a governor, and then with the people down there supporting it, then there's a tremendous amount of pressure there. But mostly, in my experience, and I think that you can all relate to this, you have to have something that you can show people is going to benefit, right? And it's bulletproof or waterproof or whatever you want to, and then you begin to push it and get people to buy in on it. And those that will balk on, say, something like property tax, well, then that's where the people start really pushing and saying, we want this. And then, and that's politically, that's how it'll happen. But let me just explain my property tax, I guess, plans. Because we've talked about the need to protect private property. And right now, in the situation we're in, what's wrong with property tax? Yeah, you never own your property.
Guy down in Sandpoint lost his house.
Yeah.
He owned it free and clear, and he kind of balked on the property tax because he thought it wasn't a real thing. And, you know, it's not, it's immoral, I don't like it.
It is.
And, you know, the older we get, the more breaks we should get, but he lost it. He just absolutely
So
lost the property.
people lose their homes to the state every day because they can't pay their property tax. And it's usually the elderly or the disabled or someone lose their job for a long time. It is a reality. People are losing their homes because you can't pay.
Received an email from Ron Nate.
Okay.
He's the representative from around Rexburg.
Okay.
And there was some interesting stuff in his email. And he says to me, I look at it as a conversation. He says, the state of Idaho has overtaxed the people this year, 1 year, 40%.
Yeah.
They have 40% more money than they have budgeted.
Yeah.
And he says, now what should we do with that?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what Brad Little's gonna do with it.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
He's gonna give you a little bit of that and try to buy your vote, right?
He couldn't buy anything.
So let me, yeah, that's a kind of put that on, cause that's a good topic. You talked about taxes and so forth, but let me flesh out this property tax a little bit. Okay, so, we don't truly own our homes as long as we have to be paying somebody to be able to live there. It's immoral, it's the state's way of deifying itself, saying, we own everything, and you have to pay us for it. It is completely contrary to the American dream. And it is a Marxist pillar, part of the one of the communist pillars, and we have to get rid of it. We have to get rid of it. And so I'm proposing, but then we have this, government has to be funded, the sheriff needs funds and other.
Who's big sales?
Yeah, they can make sales.
Cakewalk.
Oh, Ben, I like you. So let's, I don't want to play that yet. So, I'm proposing that we replace it with a consumption tax. And it's very simple, or you call it a transfer tax. It's very simple. You buy a home, there would be a 3, 4, 5%, whatever needs to, we need to work that out. But let's say it's a $400,000 home. You buy it, it's 5%, it's easy math. Then $20,000 at the time of purchase would be due to the county. That could be rolled into the mortgage, so you pay the county off, and then you pay your mortgage off, and you own your home. And so from the very beginning of you owning a home, the state and the county already has been paid. They no longer have interest in your home. Now the agreement between you and the bank, well, that's a different thing, but that's always there. Or if you want to just buy it flat out and you have the money to do it, well, it'd be that amount plus 5%, you pay it off and you're done. Now, you might ask, well, does the math work out? And if I could get this thing to work right, I'd show you the math. But I don't think I'm gonna get it here. Oh, here we go. Okay. I did kill it, but I got it here. I'm gonna show you this. Okay. So let's take a $400,000 home, because that's the average cost of a home in Idaho now. Did you know that?
Yeah, Northern California.
Yeah. Oh, Northern California, is that what you're saying?
That's what
Oh,
I
it's an average, and in the city, it's 540,000 average home, which is another problem. But so if you take, and our property taxes are going up, but we looked into what the average cost would be. It's $2,000 to $3,000, depending on what county you live in, for that value of home, which over a 30-year period of time would bring into the county $60,000 to $90,000. And we've already talked about the reason why property tax needs to be rid of. So if we replace it with a consumption tax, you take that same $400,000 home, 5% at the time of the sale, $20,000. You roll that into the mortgage, and that ends up being $20,000 for the state. You think, well, that's a far cry from 60 to 90,000. But you have to calculate that the average home sells 3 to 5 times in a 30-year period. So it ends up being $60 to $120,000 revenue to the state. It more than covers, or to the county, it more than covers what property tax is doing now. But what's the difference? You own your home. And so there's only a few negatives. There's some challenges. What you do, you know, for those who have their homes now and they're not gonna, you know, what you do to kind of compensate for that revenue. There's also, you will end up paying interest on the 20%. That's a negative. But it's far outweighed by you being able to own your home. And so I will fight that battle. That's something I will do. It's something that I feel we must do. Protecting private property is a must. Yes?
What about the folks that own their land? I got a good friend of mine, they've been on their property for 100 years in the family. They're paying property taxes, the taxes are going up. What do you do with them?
Well, so that question, I don't know if I think it came in after this question was asked, but there'll have to be some type of, for those that have own their home, and depending on, you know, how long they've owned it or something, there'll need to be some period of time, maybe like a 5-year period of time where they pay, pay a certain amount, whatever it might be. There is going to have to be some of that to get us all at the same spot. And that would be, 5 to 10 years. And then after that, we can rely on the sales of property to be able to fund the legitimate purposes of government. And I say legitimate purposes of government because we do need to downsize the waste and the size of our governments and so forth, even locally. So, that's what we're working on. Like, what would be the best way to get everybody to the same point? Do we continue the property tax as it is for another, 10 years, or do we do something else? And
Have you considered implementing something like California's Proposition 13?
I don't know what California's Proposition 13 is, so
It's one of the few things they did right.
it's one of the few things they did right.
It locks in your tax in the year that you bought it for the value of the home that it was.
Interesting.
So, for example, my mother bought it, 50 years ago, 60 years ago, she still pays the same tax based on the value of the home when she purchased it.
Well, I think as long as, because we have to get to where we are not paying the state for our property. So if it was, I could see that happening for the interim, like until, say like maybe lock it in for 10 years, right? And then at 10 years, it's all about when the consumption tax, right? So, yes.
The problem, I won't admit where I came from, but
Hey, what kind of license plate do you have on your vehicle?
the problem with that situation is with Prop 13 is they have things called mellow rooms, they have law enforcement tax, lighting tax, hospital tax that are outside they don't follow the property. It's an assessment based upon, and so like my mortgage was only $1,100 a month. But by the time I got done, and my taxes weren't that much either. But by the time I got done with law enforcement, lighting, hospital, all that was assessed separately.
Yeah.
Okay? And so by the time I got done, the reason I left is my tax was as much as my mortgage. And going to go up again. So Prop 13 was a good thing.
Yeah, and I love what he's saying. This has been an issue for me because these people that have been here forever.
Right.
And now property values are skyrocketing, they're gonna get taxed off their land.
We are. It's a problem right now. it's a problem that we have to deal with. I mean, you know, they usually will push, you know, a year or two, kind of, there's a period of time, but, you know, we've got states right now, like, I think it's New Jersey, where it's like people are paying like $18,000, $20,000 just for their property tax. And it's something that, you know, we shouldn't be in the position where we have to pay the state to be able to live on property. We shouldn't be in that position. And it's important that we fund the legitimate purposes of government, but we find a way that it doesn't depend upon our ability to live on our land. So I believe that this is the way to do it. I think that there certainly are some things we have to work out, and those are great thoughts. So what else? Yeah.
Kind of in the same vein, not quite the same, is a lot of our families, you're not seeing a ton of young faces there, and that's because it's impossible for our children to stay local. They go get these
Yep.
nice paying jobs and earn their degrees and they come back, and they're living in our homes because everybody else is also wants a piece of that. What is your thoughts or your intentions on enabling us to still remain as intact families in the areas that we live in?
Good question. Good question. I think I have the answer, or at least I have some thoughts. Because I think it comes down to this problem right here.
Yes.
Where 63, you know, 61 it's anywhere from 61 to 63% of our land in Idaho is being controlled by the federal government. And-
When you add in state ownership and the rest, what is it? It's gotta be 70.
Yeah, I don't know how much the state, like Endowment Lands and you know, are, but yeah, this is not that. This is also not a reservation.
Right.
So this is, the federal government is withholding the land, and it's 72% of the subsurface mineral rights. So they're withholding the land and the resources from us. So where does our wealth come? Where does all wealth come from? I mean, where did this table come from? This computer, your clothes, these chairs, this building, every single bit of it came from the land. It's their natural resources that came from the earth. And so all wealth is generated from the earth. Yeah,
The federal government is withholding 33 million acres of our property.
that's right. That gives you a perspective. 33 million
Do you
acres.
realize what happened if that would be put back into us?
You wanna charge them
Speculators,
tax
put
on
out of
theirs?
business, housing
Well, hold that thought. Sorry. Say that again. Would you say it? Yeah.
Yes.
So our young people, they have to be able to generate wealth so that they can stay in an area. There has to be industry that is going on in that area. And in order to be able to do that, you have to have access to the natural resources. And it was never designed for Washington, D.C. to control the land and resources in this county, in Boundary County. It just never was designed for that. Our founders did not intend for Washington, D.C., the general government, to control 63% of the land mass and 72% of the subsurface mineral rights in the state.
You bring that out, the federal government has proven an unwise steward of our lands. We have,
Absolutely.
they tie up we used to have, forest entry to where if you stayed on 5 acres of land, it could become yours. If you could prove that was a livable place to have
That's
a
right.
house. If you had water, you could grow crops. Well, I don't know if you'll believe it, but almost every one of those 5-acre plots, which were proven, the people left to go to Spokane do business, some federal person would come in and burn their houses down and run them off.
I
So
know
we
that
don't have the 5-acre home sites in the forest anymore.
So I know they
Now,
did that. in
homesteads
Hunter County.
were usurped by the federal government for one way or another in our county and in Montana. I know workable homesteads are now controlled by the federal government, not being producing livestock and alfalfa hay and vegetables for a family, and then they're not even being productive as forest land, the way the federal government is coming in and taking out the culverts and tearing down the roads and stripping the forest and burning all the firewood. People have to pay $200 a cord for firewood when you go up to Queen Mountain and Tungsten Ridge. Acres and acres has just been
Dead wood on the ground, yeah.
thousands of cords of woods is gonna be torched, which will pollute the atmosphere.
So this man is
But we
speaking
don't
the
go on
truth.
that before I get in a tirade about the federal government.
Okay, no,
Our land and not letting us build homes on good home sites and having gardens and farms, but we need to, I noticed none of the information that's out here specifies whether you are trying to make an uphill battle in the Republican primary or if you're running as an independent for an uphill battle in the general election.
Okay, well, I'm gonna save that question, because I wanna build on your federal government, okay, but save that, we'll talk about that, okay? The federal lands, you did a great job, I wanna build on that. What is the principle here? God created the earth, and he gave it to man to live on. He didn't give it to a government, he didn't give it to a state. And what we have now, and I don't think I have time here to explain to you kind of what is actually happening with the federal government when it comes to this, but we have a government that is keeping it away from the people. And they have their motives, basically religious motives. They're more religious and they're more a theology than anything. And it is a huge problem to the point where the next generation can't even afford a home. We're also destroying our #1 industry in Idaho by building on our agricultural land. And our cities are becoming so densely populated. I know it may not feel like that up here, but they're becoming more and more densely populated, and they're starting to build up rather than spread out like we should be able to do. And when any city or any state does that, you create a political power in a very dense area that is liberal. They lose their conservative identity to the point now where, and I've showed the math, and not this last virtual town hall, but the one prior to it. You go to my website and look at it, where if we continue on the path we're right now, in 4.991 years, the Democrats will control the Idaho election. And so, that's the reality that we're having right now, and it's all because the federal government is controlling our land, and we're landlocked. And we're creating these densely populated cities now, building up rather than building out. We're building on our agricultural land. We're not able to, where do your children go? They go to the city. Why? Because they can't work here, because you can't generate wealth without the land and the resources. You can't have a house and build it without land and resources. You can't provide food or any type of industry without the land and the resources. And so there's not the jobs or the opportunity or even the land to live in these beautiful little towns when they're surrounded by millions of perfect land that's resource rich in order to be able to live off of. We have to fight this battle. So hold that. I'm going to make one more point, and then I want to answer your question. But who should fight the battle? Should it be a little ranching family out in the middle of Nevada?
Everybody.
Well, yeah, it should be everybody, but by design, our founders said the state should fight that battle. The state is the one that said, look, federal government, you don't have constitutional jurisdiction over this land. But what they do is, because they're receiving so much money from the federal government, they don't want to bite the hand that keeps, I wouldn't say feeding them, but, you know, keeps giving them a whole bunch of candy bars, right? They don't want to bite that hand because they like the power that they get by getting the federal money, and therefore they leave the people exposed. And when someone says, look, this is my land, federal government, not yours, then they send a 213 armed federal army after you. And that should not happen. The state should stand in between the people and the federal government and say, look, you're not going to do this. And that's what the governor should do. The governor should, you know, activate that and fight for the people, because it's been wrong almost from the beginning of Idaho being a state. Well, actually before Idaho became a state, and then into Idaho becoming a state. Nevada is the same thing. In Nevada is 89% federally controlled. That means 11% of its land is state and private. Utah's 69%, and we're 63. We're the third. So anyway, now your question.
Just to dig a little deeper, because I get where you're going with this, but when I'm thinking about it, I'm thinking, yes, let's open this land, right, to give opportunity. But the other part of me goes, the opportunity is not going to be for the $40,000 a year Idaho worker. It's going to be for multimillionaires that have earned their money somewhere else, that purchased the land, because that's what we're facing here. You know, my son can afford a $200,000 or $300,000 house, but every time he goes out there, there's 6 people in line from another state that are willing to pay $800,000.
Yeah, so
what would you propose to prevent that land from becoming out of our hands completely?
okay, that's a great question. Did everybody grab that question?
Yeah.
That's what's that? So she said, well, what keeps just people from out of the state coming in, and let's say we dispose of the land, which we will need to do, right? And let's say it goes up for, let's say a lot goes up for auction. Well, what keeps somebody from out of state with a bunch of money just coming in and never, you know, always buying it all up, and maybe it keeps even a large corporation comes in and just keep buying it all up, and that keeps these young people that are needing houses for themselves, you know, what keeps that from happening? And that's a really great question. I have an answer for you. Go ahead.
I think that if areas of land was released to the people, those big cats would start buying it, but because more land and more land and more land was released to the people, I think the incentive, the price of the land would not continue to go up, it would start coming down statewide, and I think that would take
So,
get rid of
the free market, supply and demand.
Yeah, and I think they would, maybe a couple of years, they might start buying in, but I think after that, they would see their profits wouldn't be there because everything's kind of settling out and down.
I think what you're talking about, there are free market principles, and there is some reality there. I definitely agree. But we have some really good examples of disposal, and one of those is disposal of land. What would be one that most people know about? You mentioned it. What's that?
Homestead Act.
Yeah, the Homesteading Act, right? Homestead Act. So let's look at those, because what will need to be created and legislated is the best way to dispose of it. So let's look at the Homesteading Act. It was based upon prior appropriation of beneficial use. First come, first serve, right? If you will. And you had to improve it in order to keep it. And it was like a 5-year period of time. So if you got to an area, you were first out there, you could claim a certain amount. There was a limit, a section. You could claim a section, and then you had to stay on it. I believe it was 5 years, and you had to improve it. And you had to show that you were living on it, and you couldn't have 2 going on at the same time. Okay? These were, and it didn't allow for a corporation to do it. It didn't allow for an individual to buy multiple of them. And these are rules of disposal that will need to be put in place when we dispose of this land. And you can even put in rules like residents of Idaho get first dibs, right? So these are things that can be done. And so I'm going to just really briefly here, because we're proposing that because we love our hunting, fishing, hiking, and all that too, right? We love to be able to go and access and to camp and to hunt and to fish. We're talking about 33, just shy of 33 million acres that the federal government is controlling. And we're proposing that and working on a plan where we will take some of this area and that is where we hunt, fish, hike, and we make that multiple use land, multiple use area. And what that is multiple use is where, yeah, the people have a right, not a privilege, a right to access to hunt, fish, hike, to camp, to enjoy, but also we're logging, we're grazing, and we're even having some mineral and other things going on. This is multiple use. This is how this land was developed in the first place, right? The hunters get to enjoy the roads mainly because of the loggers. And we've lived this way, and it was originally, the West was originally established that way. And so we'll take some of this and preserve it for that. But not to not use, to use. Multiple use. And then the lands around our towns and our cities and other parts where we can use for agriculture, those federally controlled lands will be made available for disposal in some mechanism that is created in order to dispose of it to families, to individuals, so our young people and other people who don't have homes can come and use that. In essence, homesteading. It's probably the best way to explain it, right? Become available. Because that's what God intended it for us to use. And we can access our forests, we can log, we'll have mills, we'll have, mineral opportunities. We've got tons of natural gas here. We'll be able to use and benefit that. And who benefits? Not the government. It'll be the people. And it's a battle, it's a big battle, but it's something that we must fight, or we will follow what Oregon did, what Washington's done, California, Nevada, New Mexico, Colorado. If you would have told me growing up that Nevada was going to turn liberal, I would have said, no way, no way. And now it is. Just a couple decades later. And what's the problem with Nevada? You got two major metropolitans landlocked by 89% federally controlled land. And there is no economy anywhere else except Las Vegas and Reno. That's it. Everybody has to go there. You drive through Nevada, it's like ghost towns everywhere you go. These buildings that at one time were thriving mining communities are just old buildings that are have plyboard over all their windows. And it's this problem right here. And it's something that in Idaho we have to solve, and it has to be, I believe that it needs to be the state that fights that battle, not individuals trying to just survive. So I intend on doing that, and I'm very passionate. Some people grew up like loggers, multiple generations of loggers, or miners, or maybe they are fishers or something. Well, I grew up multiple generations of fighting this very fight. Like, I'm at least the third generation that has been openly fighting to preserve our land and our rights against the federal government taking it. So it's in my blood. It's what I'm doing. That's what I'm going to do, and I will fight this battle.
So you're not the first one I've heard talk about this, but I've yet to heard a solid plan on how.
Okay. So
How are you going to take control of that?
I've got an answer. Got an answer. I will say that I'm the only one that I know that's run for office that's been 2 years in federal prison fighting this battle.
Yeah.
And won. My dad still ranches today just like he did, just like my forefathers did 5 generations ago on the same land. Those cattle never left the land. Even though we were drug into federal prison and the courts Those cattle never left the land. So just a little bit of that, but you're right, and I appreciate you bringing that up because it's very simple. How? How do we do it? And I'm going to ask you a question to try to emphasize how we do this. If you take, so you look at a county map, or you go to the county recorder's website, and you'll see that the county's broken up into parcels, right? And they're all numbered. Well, then you can see typically depends on the county's website, you can see who owns it. Jim Smith owns this one, right? And it's parcel number this. And then you'll go and look and it'll say BLM or U.S. Forest Service or U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And it'll say there will be a parcel on there. Well, I want you to go down to the county recorder and ask them to show you the title to that land, to that parcel. And you know what they're going to tell you? There is no title. It's unappropriated. Now there's some, like what you were talking about, that were private property. So don't get this mixed up. And then the federal government took it back, or stole it, or whatever, or even purchased it. Now those were titled into individuals' hands. They have a title, and then the federal government either bought it back or took it back. Now those will have a title. Why? Because they were already appropriated. But the majority of this land, almost all of this land that I'm talking about here, is unappropriated land. Never been titled. And what does the county and the state have power to do? To appropriate. We have power to title land. And we will do it. We will appropriate land. We will fight that battle. Is it going to be a battle? Absolutely it's going to be a battle. You know, every environmentalist in the world is going to attack us for doing it. But it's a battle that the state takes. The state does for the people, with the people backing it up. We want this. We need this. We have to have this. And the state pushing to do it. And winning that battle. I completely, 100% believe that we can and must win that battle. So that's a very simple, boiled down. We will appropriate the land. Thank you for asking that. I'm glad we didn't leave the topic without actually talking about how we do it. All right, what else? What else?
What about the 1 in 10?
Well, you're going to have to explain more to me because my brain is not working.
I always thought the government was only allowed to own.
Oh, you're talking, okay. Yeah, you're talking about something that we've almost forgot about, right? So what is he talking about when he says 1 in 10? So now let's go to the state. Okay, the state, all the parcels or sections is actually what it is, sections, 640 acres. Every one out of every 10 sections was designated, and the state took control over it, the state of Idaho, and they're called Endowment Lands. And they were there to create revenue for the schools, for public schools. So 1 out of every 10 section in Idaho is supposed to be generating revenue to pay for our public schools. But that's a lot of work, right? The bureaucrats hate work. Last thing they want to do is, try to, sell the forest rights to somebody so that they can log it and they make several $1 million. But that's a lot of work. Let's just tax the people on their private property, and then that can go to our schools. And that's how we'll do it. That's a lot easier. We can just send them a bill and say we're going to take your home if you don't pay it. So we have literally, and most of these sections out there are just land not being used. They're burning up, or they're just not being used because the state has decided it's just too much work. But that's the way that we paid for schools until about 1930 or so, right around there. Then all of a sudden we just started implementing communist tactics to apply property tax to your homes and your property, right? So anyway, they're called state lands, they're called endowment lands, they're called school lands, and they're out there. and we need to use them. And why would we use them? We could lower the cost of, or lower the taxes because we're generating revenue off of these lands. Either that or we need to dispose of them and get them into the people's hands. The earth is not meant to set idle while people need it.
You said, you spoke about appropriating land. And
Yes.
kind of touched on the Homestead Act. Are you saying once you appropriate it, you can sell the land? Or are you saying you go there like you kind of implied before, that you live there for 5 years, you approve it, you can keep it? Would the state be selling the land that they appropriate?
Well, these endowment lands or school lands are different than what I'm talking about with the federals. Because the endowment lands, there's a difference, there's a huge difference. They're within the Constitution. They have authority constitutionally to use those lands for schools. So don't get them mixed up. Although there's still lands they're not being used, that is controlled by the state of Idaho. When I'm talking about disposing and finding mechanisms of disposal, I am talking about federal land, federally controlled, not federal land, but federally controlled land. And how we do that, you're talking about, if I understand your question, and correct me if I'm wrong, are you saying that we would sell those, or we would do a homesteading type situation? Is that what you're asking?
I apologize, I was kind of going back to what she was talking about, open up land so our children could actually stick around. And you implied that, I feel like you were talking to the amount of land controlled by the federal government, so you'd like to open that up.
That's
I
correct.
was asking, when you open it up, are you selling it? Or what's the plan there? And if you are selling it, and it goes back to your plan of accumulating wealth, or accumulating money out of the sale of land, seems like that would be a substantial gain for the state right out of the gate.
Well, especially if you're tacking on this consumption tax at the beginning of it.
Right.
Now, there are some benefits to that. So I'm saying that that hasn't been fully decided how the disposal will go, right? Whether we just open it up for homesteading or whether we put it up for auction. But one of the benefits of like putting it up for auction, and again, we're talking about quite a bit of supply, so the price of it's going to be fairly significantly low, and we could give those who don't have property, a home, and who live in Idaho first dibs at it, something to that effect. And I'm not trying to create policy right now or trying to create statute right now, but if we did sell it in an auction type situation under the consumption tax that I'm proposing in replacement of property tax, then all of a sudden now the county has immediate funds to develop roads, utilities, all of that, to immediately do that without having to go get a grant or a bond. They can have the funds to do that. So there's some benefit there that we are working on, like what would be the best way to do it. It may be best to just dispose of it through something like a Homesteading Act, but it also may be better to dispose of it through like a public auction and just immediately start, kind of running our taxes and everything the way we have it now. Yeah, Bob?
What they're doing now is they're taking these ARPA funds to do all this stuff, so now they're even gonna get lazier with it, and they're gonna dangle those carrots out to the people, and instead of like taking the land like you're saying and using it, utilizing it, and logging it and grading it, or
Right.
watching it burn.
Okay.
We're going down in Bonners County, we're going down to the commissioner's office and fighting them. Our sheriff gave his ARPA money back. Well, that's a big hot item right now, but that's exactly what they're doing, is they're just going to the federal government and taking those funds, which, they're pennies from heaven for a lot of people, but they got some really nasty strings attached to them, and they're gonna get their claws in here bigger unless we get control of doing stuff like what you're saying.
So-
We need to feel like we need to go there,
So-
be more self-sufficient with our own land.
Need, yes. What's happening now is the federal government, so thank you, Bob. Federal government got control of our land and resources and keeping us from benefiting and generating wealth. I mean, imagine having $1 million in the bank, but 630,000 of it you can't use, right? It's just there. And that's a little bit of a, just a little bit, it's probably more like, imagine we have imagine we have $1 trillion in the bank, right? And 630 billion of it we can't use. That's probably a little bit more in reality. There's estimates showing that in the western United States that the federal government is controlling over $117 trillion worth of just subsurface mineral rights. That's not forests and anything, it's just subsurface mineral rights. Anyhow, so here's actually the state breakdown of where we generate, or where we get our state funds from, or state funds. So the general funds and the dedicated funds would be like, you know, when you go to the gas station, you fill up and they tax you. It's dedicated. There's several dedicated funds. The general funds would be like your income tax and so forth that comes from the state. And then you can see here that 36%, so over a third of our, you know, income, if you will, I don't know if I want to call it income, but I guess it comes from the federal government. And we have what we call PILT, which is payment in lieu of taxes, meaning we can't pay our own bills unless we get money from the federal government because the state has no way to generate money off of, you know, taxes and so forth off of 63% of its land. So the federal government says, well, we're not going to give you your land, in essence, but we'll give you payment in lieu of taxes. We'll pay you money, but that makes us completely dependent on the federal government. And then not only that, what Bob's talking about is almost every agency, many corporations, you know, our state, our counties, our sheriffs, our cities, all of that are going and getting grants or even loans, but mostly they're grants from the federal government. And they all come with strings attached. They say, we will loan you, $2 million, or not loan, we will give you $2 million, but you have to sign this. And like when it comes to like a county sheriff, they're making them sign things like use of force policies, where they're escalation policies and that they have to train to their deputies rather than de-escalation policies. And they actually are signing and controlling our governments from all the way from the top to the bottom, and our institutions, including our corporations. They're controlling them by funding them, giving them all this money, and making them sign agreements. And most of these COVID mandates that have happened in Idaho came to us that way. The federal government says, we got billions of dollars we're going to give you for COVID relief funds, but you have to do this. You have to force masks on your children in school. You have to force vaccinations. You have to do all of these things. And basically do what we tell you to do. And it's what our founders said. The founders said that if the federal government or the general government was to take and tax the people directly and control their land and resources, that it would put the states and the people in what they called undue obedience. And that's where we're at. We are in a situation where we are being put under undue obedience. And you can see right here, 36% of our state funds come from the federal government. We can't be free and independent. We shouldn't do that. We can't even pay our own bills. We are a welfare state. We take more from the federal government than we give. That means some other state is having to pay our bills. When we got 63% of the land, we are resource rich. This is a wonderful state, beautiful state, full of, minerals and resources, but we can't use them. Anyhow.
We can't even pick huckleberries right now because they tore up the roads to get to the huckleberry patch.
That'll make you mad. Oh, okay, what else? So let's talk for about another half an hour and then we'll wrap this up. I think we said we'd be done by 8. What else do you want to talk about? Any other thoughts? You have any questions for me? Like, I've been accused of joining a Marxist organization called Bureau of Land, or not Bureau of Land. That's BLM, right? Black Lives Matter, right? I mean, you want to talk about that? Let's talk about that. Maybe we don't want to talk about that. We don't have to, you know. I actually heard that. What was the other one? There's some really good one. What's that? Oh, Antifa. Did I join Antifa? Oh.
Where's your member card?
Yeah, my member card. Well, my member card comes in the form of a chain hooked on the end of a pole.
Oh, there you go.
Right? And you swing it around. That's how you become a member of Antifa. Anyway, whatever you want to talk about. Right here and then right here. And I think there was a hand over here, right? Okay. Okay, go ahead.
Hot topic. One of the things that litmus test, one of the things that people will divide on back and forth is the abortion issue. You've taken a really strong stance. I appreciate your guts and your courage, and I appreciate you saying what you're saying. But why put it out there like that when so many people are gonna just be turned away by it?
So, I believe.
Not. I love your position.
Right.
But it was bold.
So, I believe that part of my duty in running for office, running for governor, is to simply give the people a choice. I mean, it's your choice. But I can't give people a choice without being open and upfront. Like, otherwise I'm not giving them a choice, right? So I need to be upfront and open. Say, this is what I plan on doing. These are the fights that I'm going to fight the hardest. These are the fights that I think need to be fought, but they might not take priority, right? And you get to choose. You get to choose whether you want someone like me or not. And that means the people of Idaho are accountable for what they choose. But if I'm being deceitful or, you know, somehow not being open, then that's not really their choice. Like, I'm not presenting the choice. And so I do not see how Idaho can continue to pay for abortions and have the blessings of God. I do not see it. I do not see how we ever get out of the problems that we're facing, how we ever preserve liberty against the greatest attacks ever known in the history of this earth without God's help. And He will not bless us if we do not end this terrible thing that is happening within our states. And so I'm giving people a choice. And I intend on, again, making a stand. I've talked to Riley about this. I've talked to Judy. I cannot be a governor and have that going on in the state. I will not take upon that responsibility. I will not be accountable to God to say, look, I allowed these children, these babies, innocent, to be killed while I was governor. I won't. I would rather not be governor. So that's a stand I have to make. I have to make that stand. I have to say, look, if I'm governor, day one, we will not be doing this. Period. So that's it. What's that?
Can we vote tonight?
Maybe we should, right? All right, right here. Let's see. I think I might have got out of order, but is everybody all right with him having the floor? Okay, go for it.
We'll bug him later.
I just wanted to add to that is that is the number one issue in this country is abortion. We murder our own children.
Yeah.
We talk about all the atrocities happening over in the Middle East. No, nothing is worse than we do here.
Yeah.
Mothers murder, and they're not putting a gun to their kid's head and pull the trigger. They're cutting them up in little pieces. How much more atrocious can you get? I mean, you can't. And for you, when I saw your thing, and I was undecided, and I came to that, and I was like, this is it. Like that, he got the number one topic right. Like that is the most important issue. I don't care what else you're standing on, anything else. Like that is the most important issue. And there isn't a single politician in the entire country that would have ever said that. And I'm just, I pray for you. I'm so grateful to you that you did that, and that God bless you for it. Because that is the number one issue in this country, and nobody says that. Nobody cares.
Well, thank you for saying that. as I have made that stand and have reflected on, well, is that, the best way to present it and so forth, I can't tell you how many times I believe that the Spirit of the Lord has confirmed to me that that is a right place to be, the right place to be and the only place to be. So right.
Just to drive home that point, many people don't know this figure, but since 1973 Roe v. Wade, we've killed 5 times more babies than were killed in the Holocaust. Wow. 5 times the Holocaust.
Thank you. Well, all right, right here.
Southern border.
Oh, I'm glad Idaho's not on the southern border.
They're flying it in here.
Yeah, you're right.
The whole country's a southern border.
Yeah, that's true.
So, how do you feel about it?
Hey, that's the other one. I was trying to remember. Did you know I'm an Oprah's Borders guy?
Somebody told me you were.
Yeah.
That's what I asked.
Yeah. Me and the founder of the BLM, not Bureau of Land Management, we come up with this idea that we can have open borders and, it'd be so great for our country. So, I will explain this because I did make a stand. And it may be an unpopular one, it might be something that necessarily, but I'm going to explain it to you. Because I believe, there are statistically 3 types of people that immigrate or come into another country or into a state. Doesn't matter if we're talking about coming from Oregon or Washington, or we're talking about coming from the southern border. They come here for 3 reasons. One, these aren't in order. I'm just going to explain. One is they want a handout. They're looking for a handout. They want to go and live off of somebody else. And so they go and look, well, where's the best place to do that? Well, the United States of America is, right? I mean, you can go there, get free housing, get free food stamps, get clothes and free education. All you got to do is get across that border, and if you get them in the right place, they might even fly you there and introduce you to your new home and your new life that somebody else is paying for. Okay? So that's number. Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of crazy programs going on there, and so number 2 is they come for criminal opportunity. We've got like the cartel. You've got situations like in California and Oregon where you can't even prosecute a person if they steal under $950. Well, what are they saying to all the criminals in the rest of the country, the rest of the world? Come to Oregon, come to California, right? So they do come. They will come. That's why Antifa is so taking over Oregon, because they haven't stopped, and their criminal justice system is not working, and they have policies that allow them to be criminals. The 3rd type of people come because they want to be free. They want to work. They're looking for opportunity. They're looking to be good neighbors. They want to live the American dream. They want to own property. That's why they came. And most of our ancestors are those people. I know mine certainly are. They weren't looking for a handout. They were looking for freedom, fleeing from tyranny, looking for the opportunity to homestead something, to own property, to improve up on it, and to feed into their family among people that are willing to defend liberty. So you take those 3 people, those 3 types of people, and you say, well, we have a choice. We could try to build a wall. This is where I wasn't agreeing. We could try to build a wall. We build it really tall. We build it really long. And we try to keep those people out. Yet on the other side of the fence, we still got all the welfare programs. We still got all of the, food stamps and housing and everything. All they got to do is get over that wall. That doesn't make sense to me. If you want to stop people from coming here for handouts, what do? You stop the handouts. I mean, it's not hard to figure out, right?
It's rocket science.
Did you know that, it's rocket science, right? I mean, it's rocket science. Yeah, I'm a smart guy, right? And you've got a border wall that's built, which is pretty awesome. It really is. But did you know that Mexican kids are having contests how fast they get over it? They're under 17 seconds now. 17 seconds. That's not how you deter people from coming here that want handouts. And same with criminal opportunity. I mean, those people, you know, they got millions and millions of dollars. They could cut through that fence or go under that fence or fly over it or whatever. But when you have a system, a criminal justice system, that is finding and requiring them to give back or to restore the damages back to a victim, a person who was victimized, they're going to say, don't go to Idaho to commit crime. Just don't go there. It's not worth it. Don't go to Idaho because they don't give anything. And what you're going to see is you're going to see the freeways both ways full of people. You're going to see all these people who want handouts going to Oregon. And we want them to go. We want them to go to Oregon. Goodbye. Go there, get your food stamps, get your free housing, and go hang out with Antifa. See how that works for you. And then coming in are people like you and I who want freedom, who are willing to stand for freedom, who are willing to be good neighbors. And that's what you create. And the criminals will just say, just don't go to Idaho. So that's my stand. That's my stand. It's not open borders. It's just making sense of what really is happening. And that's where I stand strongly on that. So Idaho is going to stop. I want to show you something else here while I got you. Let's see, I think it's this one. Yeah, so look at this. This is how Idaho is spending the money we're getting. 40% is welfare. Health and Human Services. 40%. Another third is education. Now, this is not including the property tax. So about double that for education, right? This is just the state, what the state is spending the money on. This is not coming from the property tax. That's additional to this. And then you can see like the more legitimate purposes of government are like little slivers. Just get out of the way, government. Stop the handouts. Get your education under control. And then these functions of government are needed, and we need them, most of them, I should say. Man, now we're talking about minimal taxes, really having a strong economic development going on in the state, freedom, and the people we don't want here because they're here for this, they're gone. They're going to another state. Well, sayonara. See you later. Go somewhere else.
Used to be in welfare in Idaho, if you did not pay into the system through job and work, you were not allowed to collect. And that changed, I think, when Mr. Obama came to visit.
So I think that's better than nothing. But again, remember I said at the beginning, we should talk about how socialist programs can be better. We need to get rid of them. So now some might say, well, Hammond's so mean, he's trying to take away the, food out of children's mouths, right? That's what he's trying to do. But I ask this question, is welfare charity?
No.
It's not. It's not, is it? It's not charity. Welfare is not charity. Welfare is someone with the point of a gun took somebody else's wealth and then decided how they were going to make someone dependent. Charity is when you see your neighbor needs you, and you go to him and you say, look, or he comes to you, and you say, yeah, I'll help you out. I'll help you on your feet. I will, and maybe the community does that. The church does that. Maybe the family does that. That's charity. And it's temporary, and it is needed, and it is something that we did for the first 150 years of this country until we started to implement these types of programs. And they will be the death of us. And so let's strip those things, push it back upon the families and the churches to do, and we'll stop attracting the wrong type of people to our state, and we'll all be the better for it, right? Much better for it. We lower our taxes, we get our, government's a lot more under control. We start having access to our natural resources and opportunity to grow and to build and to just flourish. And we apply the same principles that our founders applied at the beginning of this nation. That pushed us into such prosperity that we're still living off that today. Did you know in 1905, kind of at the beginning where it kind of started to go wrong, right? But in 1905, we made up only around 5 or 6% of the world's population, but we produced over 50% of the world's goods. Isn't that amazing? That's what we were doing then. And we could do it again, even if it's just in Idaho. We could do it again. Why shouldn't we do it again? We apply the same principles, we enjoy the same benefits. They're eternal principles. And we already understand them. We have examples of them. We know them. They're embedded in our constitutions, both state and federal. And I say we use them. I say we apply them. And so I want to, go ahead.
Well, I'll let you finish that part.
No, I'm good. I was actually going to wrap up, but I'll answer another question.
Okay, so in the last couple of years, executive power has gotten kind of out of control as far as I'm concerned. For one, how do you stand on that? For two, a lot of your positions are pretty bold. Now, would you be willing to use executive power, executive order to accomplish that, or do you go through legislature to try to do it?
So that's a great question. I have vowed to use executive power to declare that life begins at conception. But I want, because this gentleman understands something that most people don't. He understands what the executives of these governments, they basically become like kings. So a governor's like a king. So I'm going to clarify something really, and hopefully it'll answer your question. Because as governor, if I was governor, and I issue an executive order, that order does not go beyond the executive branch. It's not an order for you. I don't have authority to order you. You're free. It doesn't go to the judicial branch. They're an equal branch. It doesn't go to the legislative branch. It goes to the executive. I'm the executive. I mean, how can the CEO, the chief executive officer of Walmart, tell Target what to do? I'm writing an executive order as the CEO of Walmart, and Target has to obey me. No, that's not the way it works. And so let's say I become a tyrant, right? Which I hope that doesn't happen. I hope I don't lose my soul. I really hope I don't lose my soul, right? But my executive orders do not go beyond the executive branch. And we need to understand that as a people. Brad Little, he didn't stop us from going to church. He thought he would. Who stopped us from going to church? We did. Because we didn't go to church.
We did.
Well, I'm glad you did. I'm being general, right? So, hopefully that answers your question. It does not, the authority of a governor does not go beyond the executive branch. Yes?
Okay, so in that respect, we are still under martial law. Governor, martial law has never been lifted. Now, that to me is just trouble evil waiting to happen.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And my other concern is the DHS has their 100-mile border rule. I'm not a very fond of DHS. I think that's just federal government stepping on our toes again. But is there anything that we as a people can do to curtail their influence or their rule over us?
Well, so I see that as two questions or two concerns, right? So one is we are still being held under, according to Governor Little's thoughts, right? And his bureaucracies, they believe that they still have these powers over us, and they have enacted these things, and they think they still have them, but they're way outside their bounds. And the reason why Idaho has been more free, because what Governor Little has done in Idaho, when you look at it through his executive orders, are very similar to what Governor Inslee has done, or Newsom, or Brown. They're very similar. But why is Idaho not is much more free, open? Why are we meeting like this right now? Right?
We don't comply.
That's because we don't comply. So the reason why Idaho is more free has nothing to do with the tyrannical governor. Has everything to do with the people. We will not comply. And we must continue to not comply if we are going to be free to assemble, to worship, to travel, even to leave our homes. I mean, Governor Little, he thought he had the authority to tell you couldn't leave your home without his permission. Well, what's the first thing we need to do when that happens? We leave our home. We go visit our family. I flew to Mexico. Just for the fun of it, you know. Just got on a plane and flew to Mexico. It was like, and what did you say?
Sneak back.
Right. So when someone says you can't go to church, what do you do? Go to church. Someone says you have to close your business, what do you do? And buy another open sign, open for business sign, a great big one. That's what you do. That's how you stay free. It's not rebellion. It is necessary because you preserve liberty, you maintain liberty by claiming, using, and defending.
Okay, and I may add, when we were shut down a year ago, and for that, 2-week period or whatever it was supposed to be, okay, I managed the bar
To
downstairs.
flatten the curve, right? To flatten the curve,
Okay,
right?
I managed the bar downstairs. As soon as that time was over, I said, okay, we're opening. I opened one day, I got a threatening letter from the town saying, I'm gonna call a state if you don't close. So, am I to just, I guess if I
I'm not
have
saying it's easy.
a big bank account to fight the liquor control board that says, I'm gonna come and take your license because you opened when we said no.
Yeah, and licensing is a whole other thing, but that's
Yeah,
my,
I would go for that,
Right.
because if you knew how much we pay to have our licenses, you guys would just shake your head and say, how can you stay in business? Because we pay through the nose for that privilege.
and so let's look, you bring up a great point, and then I do need to wrap this up. I think we've had a good conversation here, but, so there are a tremendous amount of checks and balances that our founders have put in place to secure one thing: the liberties of an individual, the rights of an individual. Our Declaration of Independence, if you will, I'll give you an assignment. Go read the first couple paragraphs of the Declaration of Independence. It tells us where rights come from. It tells us why government was established. It tells us the proper way in which we're supposed to maintain our liberty, right? And so, let's say the UN wants to come in and enforce their policy or regulation upon the people's liberty. Well, who is supposed to stop that? The federal government. And if the federal government doesn't do it, who is supposed to stop it? The state. And if the state doesn't do it, who is supposed to stop it? The county. And if the county doesn't do it, then who's supposed to stop it? In fact, we actually, in the Second Amendment, that's a controversial one. What does it say? A well-regulated militia. What is a militia?
Us.
It is the people. Actually, by definition, U.S. Code says any able-bodied person between, it used to be man, but they went to person, between the ages, I think, 17 and 65 or something. It is the people.
Yep.
So it's not a scary word. It's not something, unless you talk to, they tried to make it scary. It's not. So a well-regulated militia, and what does well-regulated mean? It means they're prepared, they're organized. Doesn't mean that they're government structured. Okay? But then what does it say about it? Well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state.
Yes.
So in order for us to be free, we have to be prepared to defend our own liberties. Because we have seen in times past where these checks are already broke down. I believe our federal checks and balances against the world are almost completely broken down.
Yeah.
We have state right now, we're in a battle right now. Idaho's in a battle of its conservative identity. Is the state going to defend liberty or not? I think we are going to have to answer that question this election, this season. Is it going to be defend liberty or not? And if not, can we rely on our county sheriffs and our county elected to them to do it? Will they do it? And if they won't, then we must. We must. We have to. It's just, that's what it is. That's what it's always been. And it is our responsibility, but we've lived under such great blessings to be able to have these checks in place where the federal government, anybody outside the world wants to target individual liberties, rights that God gave us, they say, no, 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 no. And we've built up militaries and we put in all these funds to protect those rights. And I can't say that we can rely on them as much as at least we could in the past. I won't get into that. But then we have the state. We got the state, right? Can we rely on that? I don't know. They've turned their sights around the wrong direction. And the counties? And so it puts us in a precarious situation. It's just the reality, right? But we're not alone. This battle's been fought. President Reagan said that it has to be fought on every generation has to fight this battle. And depending on how the prior generation does, depends on how free the generation after it is.
Why is it every time, every time I hear our certain leaders speak, I hear him saying something that's outside the Constitution. I hear him saying things that subvert the Constitution, that go extrajudicial, not within the rule of law. And you're labeled an anarchist and all this other stuff.
Is that another name? Or?
Yeah, I'm a seditionist, an anarchist. But I have never heard you say anything that went outside the Constitution. So I'm just trying to, I hear him speak, and almost every speech he gives is something that goes outside the Constitution, outside the rule of law. Even these edicts about the epidemic, that was answered by the Supreme Court right after the Civil War, that they couldn't do those things. But they don't listen to the rule of law. But I've never heard you say anything that's outside the rule of law.
Right.
So they hate this.
Yep.
We also do.
They hate it.
Yeah.
Because what it stands for, symbolic, is a defense and protection of the liberties that God gave us, that God, our Creator, gave us. And if they can break those down, then they can get what they want. And ultimately, it is an attack on God, and it is a spiritual battle that we're in. Right? And so, I want to.
Any extra copies of that?
I got a whole bunch. I think we do. So I want to thank you for your time. We need to wrap this up. I hope it's been beneficial to you. I know it's been beneficial to me. I'm grateful for the conversation we've had here. And I hope that this conversation and others, I recommend you go to my website, votebundy.com, and watch the videos, read the materials, and so forth, and gain confidence in what I'm saying here, so that you can feel like you can support me by talking to your friends and family, by spreading the information that you get from us, by subscribing to our email list so we can communicate with you, and also by supporting us financially. And that's, what we need to do. We have a great opportunity here to be able to, the political climate in Idaho is just right to elect somebody like me. I wouldn't have been electable 2 years ago. I wouldn't have been, and I hope that I'm not electable in 10 years in Idaho, that we have solved the problems enough that someone like me is just not needed. But right now, if I don't do it, then someone else needs to. Someone else needs to stand up. And I'm willing to, I would love to just go back and raise my little family. I've spent enough time away from them. Right? I would love to be able to just go back in business, make money again. I'd love to be able to do that. I'm grateful for the many, many blessings that I've received. Right? But I see an absolute need for us to get these things into control, and I feel and understand that there's a perfect opportunity here. So, yeah, Greg.
Sorry, I didn't talk earlier, but I'm gonna start crying. But
Louder.
I am in back when I lived in Middleton, and we just got out of prison, and I took my dump truck to one of my other trucks, and we had hours and hours of conversations, and I remember one time giving the check, he said, I appreciate that. I wasn't gonna be able to make payroll this week. And the government shut him down. He showed the wealth that God blessed him with. The government completely shut him down, took customers away from him, 12 customers. I guess I just want to share that I know this isn't just a silver tongue performance machine that says the right things, and we all feel frustrated or deceived by somebody. How the heck did I fall for that? But this man has put everything on the line. We know his family, we know him, and he's worth sharing. Because what we're sharing is the Constitution and God-given rule of law, the republic, the rule of law that we have to protect us from tyrants. And so I just want to add that personal witness that I know this man, and he's a man of God. So.
Thank you.
We thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's wrap this up. Maybe we can end with a prayer. Anybody want to volunteer for that? I don't think anybody asked. Someone like to volunteer to say the closing prayer? Right here.
Our dear Heavenly Father, we are so very grateful for this country that we have, for the opportunities we have to uphold it. Please be with each and every one of us to open our mouths, to shout from the rooftops the blessings that we would have if we continue to fight for our freedom. We must love it and keep it in our hearts and keep our mouths open and share with each and every one we meet that these things can come to pass according to thy will. These things we pray for in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much.
Thank you.